busy, and I thought that we've got 20 minutes, so I thought I would spend 10 or 15 saying what I think this panel is about, and then I can teach them a little bit. Is that okay? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's absolutely not what we're going to be doing. Let me just quickly show you who we have here, and then I'm going to give them a little time to introduce themselves. We have Daniela Fernandez of Sustainable Ocean Alliance. Also Georgetown University, which is mainly why I got her on the panel, but she does some other things that are pretty good too. Vice versa. Rachel Floriani, Burlington Bio, and Rachel Slaybaugh of DCDC. Yes, we have two Rachels. I did a panel a little while ago on AI, and we had two Charlies, so we know how to do this. We can handle this. But let me give each of you just like 30, 60 seconds sort of tell me like what you do, and particularly in the current context, and then we'll ask some more questions, go into some more detail about the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to share more about the ocean specifically, but also about the opportunities that we all have to be allies to the ocean and climate. So I founded Sustainable Ocean Alliance at my college dorm room when I was 19. So I was a 19-year-old student. Thank you. And what happened was that I was invited to attend a meeting at the United Nations. And it was at this UN meeting when I realized that I had two realizations. The first one being that young people were not being invited to be a part of these crucial conversations that were taking place behind closed doors. And the second realization was that every single narrative that came out of the mouth of a head of state, of an ambassador or scientist was about the problems. It wasn't about solutions. So I said to myself, okay, what if I can recruit an entire generation and have them roll up their collective sleeves to actually build solutions for our ocean and planet? And so that's what I decided to do. I graduated from Georgetown, took a one-way plane ticket to Silicon Valley because I wanted to take all of the mentality, the capital Silicon Valley, and bring it into the ocean and planet space. So that's what I've been doing so far.
Rachel F.
Yeah. Oh, that was loud. So I consider myself mainly an educator and an innovator. I am an associate professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Vermont, but I also recently, as mentioned, co-founded a company. What I try to do is break the norms, try and be someone that someone doesn't see right away. So when I walk into a room, people will see somebody different than when I open my mouth, and I love that. And I actually get like a huge kick out of that. And I just continue to do it. So I don't tell myself no. And I just want to continue to provide solutions. Mostly I work in biotech and ag tech, but I want to continue to provide those solutions that open up avenues for brainstorming, for creativity, for younger women and girls. Really, that's my big thing. So I can be up here, we can talk about food security, but really I'm up here because I'm so freaking proud of everyone in this room, of everyone who has ever talked to me, because I just want to keep talk, and not up here with you. Well, I would love to talk with you forever, Sean, but I guess I mean just, I love to talk. And it's because though, that even if it's just one of you in this room that is like, oh my God, like she said something that's pretty powerful, let me go back and just like think about it. That's awesome. That's all I want to do. That's what I'm here for. That's what I do. So thank you.
So I'm Rachel Slaybaugh, and we somehow managed to find two Rachels who are engineering professors and in entrepreneurship. So we did a good job working. So I'm a nuclear engineer by training. I was a professor at Berkeley for 8 years, and while I was doing that, I became a program director at ARPA-E, which is a office in the Department of Energy that does sort of early stage disruptive energy work, and I really loved that, and that led me into venture capital. So now I'm a partner at DCDC. We're a deep tech venture capital firm, and I lead our climate tech practice. So we have a climate specific fund, and I invest at Series B, Series C. So the panel that was before us, I'm really interested to talk with all of you just about plugging into that ecosystem and continuing to try to build diversity into the founders and other executives at our company.
So I'm I'm curious about a couple of things. One is because we have women working in various different fields around the environment, whether it's academics, whether it's small funding, whether it's large funding, whether it's biology, whether it's physics. What's the environment like for women in the areas where you're either working or you're supporting, and like around climate, like in terms of like opportunities getting better, or areas you're still seeing.
Happy to jump in. So just to frame the work that we do, we have two programs. One program focuses on empowering young people all over the world. We have 10,000 young leaders in 168 countries. So we have this global movement of change makers that are building their own grassroots solutions. And on the other hand, we have this pipeline of for-profit ecopreneurs, as we call them, right? So they're entrepreneurs building solutions to impact the health of our planet and ocean. So that's the breadth of talent that we have, all with the purpose of how can we utilize our collective skill set to build solutions, whether it be grassroots or in a for-profit way. So having said that, I'm gonna run you through a couple of stories really quickly and then just have you imagine this, right? So imagine you're one of these solutionists, right? You're an entrepreneur, you're a grassroots leader. You walk into a room where there's full of investors, right? You have 5 investors that are male. And the moment you walk in, half of them walk outside the room just by looking at you. Imagine that after that you go to a luncheon and you're talking about your solution, and one of the comments that is being made immediately is about your appearance. Imagine that after that you follow up with, say, said VC, and you're called to pushy for following up immediately. Imagine that after that you go to dinner with a potential investor and you're not sure if he's trying to hit on you or trying to fund you. So I walk you through this because all of these obstacles are things that are happening right now as we speak, and these are things that these female entrepreneurs have experienced. And so what if all of those barriers, all of those issues that they're dealing with were not part of them building these solutions? What if they just didn't have to deal with them, right? So I want to get that nitty gritty because I think that there's so many unspoken things that happen to us as women that we don't have necessary mentors, allies, supporters to even just be able to speak up and talk about these problems. And then what's the opportunity cost? If these women are so held up by all of these barriers, what if they were funded immediately, right? What if they were able to reach their full potential? So in the funding cycle, we're seeing a lot of women ecopreneurs that are being held back, not because they're not prepared, not because they don't have the credentials or because they don't have a product, it's because of their gender. And I think that's a conversation that's worth having from the perspective of how can we accelerate the rate of their adoption of their companies, but also how can we get more funding into their hands, and how can we also build more self-confidence, self-education, like how can we help them build a circle of women mentors that can truly be there for them every step of the way.
We have another VC on the panel here, and I'm curious the questions that she's addressing that women entrepreneurs face from the funding community. How is the funding community trying to address sort of these historical challenges?
Yeah, I think the previous panel talked to this a little bit as well. It's kind of a mixed bag. There are starting to be some firms and funds specifically focused on increasing diversity, or at least it's in their metrics. For a lot of groups, it's not that part of the conversation, to be honest. I think a lot of people, maybe it's an afterthought, maybe they talk about it sometimes. So I think we're not doing a great job sort of in the larger venture ecosystem, but that's part of why we're here having these conversations, right? And there are some of these groups that are trying to do a better job. So like at my firm, we don't, similarly to Poolwater, like we don't have specific metrics, but we do try to put in the extra effort on the pipeline building. We also try to help in ways that are broader than just looking at founders. So we help with recruiting diverse independent board members. We help with when our companies are hiring executives, helping make sure they have diverse candidates in their executive pool. So that even if the founder isn't a diverse person, we're putting diverse people on the leadership team, and that is hopefully helping the culture inside of the company It's helping create people who will go be founders later, board members later. So we're trying to sort of overall tackle the ecosystem. And I think, I mean, oh, now I can't remember who said it, but the point about at this, you know, we invest at Series B and Series C, there aren't that many women founders by the time they make it to Series B and Series C. And so we're also looking at what are all these other strategies that we can use to try to help build out diversity in teams.
Yeah, that's something that's interesting because you were talking about you doing a lot of like seed type investing, maybe up to Series A, and then we have this sort of donut hole, right, where, you know, like we to get across from like $100,000, $25,000, $100,000, I think, you know, up to like 15 million, 100 million. What can we do to fill in that gap there?
I think the first thing is de-risking capital and getting other investors in the space to not be that risk averse. There's also a lot of education that needs to be had, and I'll just give you the biggest ally in our fight against climate change is the ocean. And most people don't realize that the ocean is absorbing 30% of the carbon in the atmosphere, right? The ocean is absorbing 90% of heat in the atmosphere, right? The ocean is actually feeding 3.1 billion people on the planet. You have ecotourism in the industry, you have shipping as an industry, you have fashion as an industry. So all of these industries are up for disruption in every single category. And when you look at traditional investment firms and VCs, they look at the ocean like, oh no, that's philanthropic, right? We're not here to save the corals, we're here to make money. And the argument we're trying to make is you can do both. And frankly, those investors that are putting in the capital in right now, they're going to see increased financial returns and impact returns on investments. Though we do not have enough founders, actually funders in that space to be able to deploy patient capital, to be able to risk the capital in the space, because this industry is very nascent, right? There hasn't been many billion-dollar exits, although we do have, a lot of secondary exits that are happening. So I think we need time to prove the model works, but we also need capital to be deployed in a way that $1 trillion worth of capital, right? There's $200 billion worth of capital being deployed right now into nature positive solution, and $3 trillion worth of capital being deployed into negative solutions in the space a year, right? So how do we bridge the gap between the $200 billion and $3 trillion?
Rachel F., with a new startup, what's it been like for you to try to get funding, being taken seriously, and is it any different in different industries? Like I think you were saying that the food is maybe a little more sort of gender positive than other sectors, for instance? Or?
Okay. So I'll address the first thing
Sure.
you brought up, being a funder and finding funding. Okay. Okay. So yeah, being a woman, right? Being a woman, it's very, very hard to walk into the room when the investors are expecting to meet Dr. Floriani. So I'll be in the room, the investors will walk in, I'll stand up and they'll say, cool, when's Dr. Floriani gonna be here? And at that moment, I am just like, I have a point to prove. That is super frustrating though. Throughout my entire education, being an engineering professor, I feel like I always have to prove something. When I came here today and right now, my attitude has shifted slightly to trying to be the female founder, trying to be a role model, I mean, like, yes, I can fight, I can do it. Now what I'm starting to recognize is that to build this community is I actually should try and search for female investors. Like we have investors and they are white men, and I'm very appreciative of that. But I am also very much aware, because of today, that that is not going to help create wealth within this community. So now addressing that second point. I come traditionally from tissue engineering, from biomedical engineering, and I've recently sort of maneuvered into food. What I've noticed is that when I have done traditional engineering, or even in medicine, which is still a lot of the biotech is run by men, when I start talking about food or when I start engaging in cellular agriculture, I'm finding a lot more women. The reason being what has been brought up already today. We make decisions about food, we make decisions about the health and the care of our families. And so being in the food area, now being made more aware that I need to look for females across the board, I'm actually energized. I am one of those people where if I am the only female in the room, I feel empowered to make a point. Here, I'm way more empowered. Okay, let me just make that clear. I'm way more empowered being here because I hope that all of us go out there and make a point. And that is really, I just want to pay it forward. When I think about my biggest role, so not only as a co-founder, CTO, but really as an educator across the board, is I just want to make people aware that like we care, you should invest in us, not only in a company, but I mean really what everyone's been saying so far. And trying to go after money. So being in engineering, I was like, oh, this has got to be the worst ratio, right? I'm gonna go to business, there's gonna be so many more women, it's gonna be great. No, there's not. I have only made it here because of our allies. I would say our male colleagues, our allies that have gotten me here. But I am going to stay here because of women. And what I think I'm hearing is that staying here, digging my heels into the ground, continuing to prove a point is critical. Because if I don't get to that Series C or Series D, then maybe many other women won't because they won't see me. Does that make sense? Like I am so driven to get there. Yeah, and it's not just even building my own community. Like I really truly believe in representation. I really truly do. And so I think now it is not only like rah-rahing for women, but really searching them out deliberately. Female investors. So all of you female investors.
So Rachel asked a couple things I wanted to ask you. One would be, not to put you on the spot, but how do we get from our Series A up to like where you're funding? Like, is there any advice or anything you think we need to change like structurally to get these like eco entrepreneurs out there?
I mean, one, I'm not an expert in, like, there are people who are experts in how do you kind of, all the cultural and systemic change that needs to happen. I have a PhD in nuclear engineering, it's different.
Is that all?
But, I mean, it is a lot of the work that we can do, which is, the truisms of introduce people into your network. When people like me who have these larger dollars a little later stage take the extra beat to try to go and give an extra meeting to a diverse founder, go try to look into pipelines that we wouldn't normally look in. I think that's part of it. The broader cultural norm of like how do we help women be more supported is sort of beyond what I can accomplish individually. So I don't have great answers that isn't the like give warm intros and go try, take the extra meeting or do the extra step of diligence. And I think maybe what I said before, that secondary solution of for your companies, try to help them have good diverse hiring practices, help them hire diverse executive teams, help them get diverse board members, like just the more we can build it together and have, make sure they have a good family leave policy, make sure they have healthcare policies that are trans inclusive, all that kind of stuff I think helps, but there's not a magic bullet.
Something I'm curious about too is I think there's a notion that, I guess we've got time for one more question here, is that, climate eco is a more sort of progressive or more open, maybe a more warm and fuzzy kind of sector. But is it when it comes to gender or maybe even just representation in general, or does it still sort of feel like it's any of you, what you're seeing?
And there are way more female VCs in climate than in other sectors that I've noticed, and it does tend to be more collaborative. And so I think that can feel helpful and it can feel more empowering for women to stay in a space because it is more of like, we all want everyone to win because of the planet.
Yeah. You experience that also, Rachel?
Yeah, I am here because women have reached out to me because they genuinely care. And I don't know if it's because they have come to a previous meeting or summit, but the women who talk to me and encourage me just want me to get out there because they want to see their efforts and their dreams come true. I'm not saying that like, they're living vicariously through me, but just like me as an educator, if I can teach a student and she can go out there and she can be an engineering manager and run a Fortune 500, freaking amazing. That's what I want. And so instead of, oh, I'm not worth it. When women come to me and they say, you can do this, we want you to do this, I do it for me and I do it for them. Because we all need to believe that like we're making a difference. And so if someone comes to me, and multiple women have come to me, and I'm so blessed to have known them, when they say, hey, we think you should do this, you could do this. And then I do it and they come back and they're like, yes, that worked, I'm gonna do it again. That matters, it matters a lot. And so I want to be selfish, but at the same time, I really think that at every stage of our career, from when we're in our college dorm room to conducting a symphony or an orchestra, I just think we have to remember that for most of us in this room, we do care. We care. And whether you're male or you're female, you have to at least believe that we do deserve a seat at the table. And I think that's been discussed multiple times. So I am kind of new to business, Series A, Series whatever, like I'm kind of we're cap table. I was making a joke earlier about cap, no cap, right? Like I had a teenager, okay. I didn't know these things, but that didn't matter. It's almost like I still had women saying, you can do this, you have an idea, go for it, you'll learn as you go. And it's true. It's true. So if we stay as a group, we can teach each other as we go. We don't have to wait until we're all ready. I think that's important.
If you don't mind just adding to
Yeah.
that we just don't have enough women in every sector. Like that's just the reality of it, right? And so we need more women role models. I can't tell you how many times I've had women to like, I know that I can be a global leader or a VC or because I see you doing it, right? So we need more role models. And last but not least, we just need to get capital in the hands of women, period. If you want a silver bullet, that's it. Put capital in the hands of women, whether it be venture philanthropy, grant making, right? Like early stage financing, just put the money there and then let's support them in making their journey come true, their dream come true, which is going to be beneficial to all of us.
That's a good wrap up, I think. Thank you.
Okay.
So you guys have been watching through the breaks and earlier today, the beautiful visuals on the screens. Some of that content has been Seaborn. Natalia, for people unfamiliar with Seaborn and maybe even the category, why don't you give us a little background on the company?
Well, I would love to. Josh, first of all, hello everyone. And I will, before I answer the question, I will share a little story. We were walking into the building. I just got back. I just flew from Seattle, took a red eye, and so it was like kind of hell of a morning. Many of you can relate. And we walked into the building, and the lady security officer goes, "Oh, I bet I know where you are going. There are all these powerful women who are walking by inspiring me all day. So thank you all. Give yourself a round of applause." That's what we do. We inspire each other and inspire others around me and around us. How many of you are familiar with Seaborn? All right, few. How many of you have ever cruised before? All right, we have a whole market opportunity here since I am planning Josh's 20th anniversary. So I was thinking about it today as I was catching the slims of the conversation. This room is full of outstanding women with amazing careers. And I thought, man, I still have a best job in the world. I am honored to be a president of Seaborn, which is an ultra-luxury cruise line. And what really differentiates us, we have very small yacht-like ships, and what we do is we provide an ultra-luxury travel experience all around the world in a way that connects our guests in the most authentic way with destinations and places they visit, with each other and with communities they visit. We do sail to 7 continents. Last time I checked, last year we sailed to 473 ports, and we have ships that are going through Antarctica and have full ice-breaking capabilities, and more traditional ships that go to Greek islands, and we go everywhere. Now we're getting ready to launch our warm water expeditions in Kimberley. How many of you have heard about Kimberley? I haven't until recently, but Kimberley is an amazing place in Western Australia. It's one of the wonders of the world. You can't really get there unless you spend like 5 days on helicopters, and or you go on Seaborn and we take you there, and it's an amazing opportunity to experience some of the wonders of the nature, but also some of the most oldest, unique indigenous communities, and celebrate that shared humanity. So that's what we do. And so we will plan your 20th anniversary on Seaborn.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. I've not been on a cruise, but my 20th anniversary is coming up, so maybe it will be spent with Seaborn. So it sounds like, I mean, amazing organization. We'll get into your path to getting to Seaborn, but you know, the industry itself, you know, has focused on cultivating, and Seaborn has focused on cultivating talent, diverse talent, especially around women, both as you would say on shore, as well as on the boats themselves. You know, talk a little about that evolution of Seaborn and the company, and sort of how you think, obviously, probably, you know, it may have skewed heavier on ship, on service roles, front of house, but talk about sort of the changes in both the executive, you know, offices, the onshore, as well as on the ships.
Yeah, well, so first of all, I do know we all are here united by the passion of empowering and enabling women to live to their full potential. I also know that everyone here in the room knows that women are not under-talented. In fact, I sit on 2 boards of the universities. Women actually have slightly higher GPAs than men, including in the School of Engineering and business schools, so which probably reflects our strive for we're perfectionists a little bit. And when people say women choose not to grow in a career, that is wrong, because every organization I worked in, when you look at the workforce, 50% of more workforce are women. So women do choose to work. Women are very talented, but when we start going up the chain, right, the percentage of women representation start dropping. So I do know that we all are united by that passion of supporting talent in women and living to their full potential. But I do want to answer your question, that the big reason for us all who are in business is it makes business sense. So I will ask you all, how many of you make travel decisions for yourself or your families? 84% of travel decisions, regardless of destination or form of travel, are done by women. 82% of travel advisors are women, and actually I am super honored because there are a few of them here in the room who are working very closely with us as well as other companies. And so when we represent women among the ranks of our leadership, we actually are representing our guest base and representing people who are driving and influencing travel decisions. So it makes a completely direct business sense. We do have ways to go, but I am very proud of our success, both shoreside and shipboard. In the last 12 months, we have over 50% of women shipboards over 50% of workforce that are women. But I'm very proud to say we have 221 female officers on shipboard, which is 40% increase since 2019. In the last 12 months, we promoted first 2 female staff captains and 3 female first officers. So I can't wait to welcome a first female captain as well, hopefully in the near future. I was doing actually a count today before coming here. Exactly 50% of my executive leadership team, shoreside, are also female leaders. And you say why it happens. I mean, it's not because we are following the quotas. We're giving decisions to most talented individual for specific role. But I do believe that more of us that sit in different roles and more of us that show different phases of leadership, the more confidence we give to other talented female leaders to say, I too can do that, and I too have aspirations to grow, and I will pursue higher career aspirations.
And obviously it takes leadership to be able to really drive that inside the organization. You came prior to the cruise industry. You came from Procter & Gamble, from P&G, which many of the CPG companies have these amazing talent development and cultivate leadership. Talk a little about sort of the learnings from being inside of P&G and how you've taken those learnings and brought them to Seabourn.
Well, first of all, I consider myself very fortunate. I actually worked in a number of very, very organizations that are very diverse and really centered around it. I worked for United Nations, I worked for P&G, very closely I worked with Clorox, who is also doing a great job in areas of diversity, and now with Carnival Corporation and Seabourn. I think the biggest things that I learned from P&G that I try to take everywhere is when we try to enable talent development in general. That doesn't mean that it's not just centered around women or any kind of minority or diversity groups in general. It's like a business goal. It requires an objective, effort, and a process. And P&G is fantastic in talent development in general. The day I started, I was introduced to Women Network. I was assigned number of mentors, both women and men. I know earlier today, and I'm bummed that I missed that conversation. But there was a session, right, on the power of mentorship, and I think we all agree. By the way, women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. So hopefully you guys talked about it. Like, don't just settle for mentors. Let's all ask who is not only coaching us, but advocating on our behalf when we are not there, and that's what defines sponsors. But I think that it's really important to have those processes and goals, because, and the goals doesn't mean quarters or something. The goals means working with individual women to develop what they want to achieve, their career blueprint. So that helped me tremendously. Procter have really introduced me to the power of networking and having smaller group discussions. So what do we do on number of every other company I worked on, but specifically for Seaborn, I do think I started sponsoring a women's speaking series where women like yourselves, right? We get together and we invite and rotate and share our experiences. And those sessions became so popular, it now spread to multiple brands, and now it's spread to Shipboard as well. And it's through the entire Carnival Corporation, 9 brands participate now in this speaking series. We did start a mentorship program where we helped women assign. And most recently, in the last 12 months, I started the program of Coffee Connects on a Shipboard, because I do believe that every time any of us visit that, bringing female leaders on a shipboard, it's a very different environment. And again, what it opens up, it's not about them learning from me. It's about them realizing that they can learn from each other if they experience very similar things. And so it creates that connection and that safe space to talk.
Right. So, as you mentioned, United Nations, Procter & Gamble, then, into a new industry, but you've also made a shift from, being in finance, most of your career in finance, ultimately becoming CFO within the organization, now to president. Probably sounds daunting to a lot of people in the room, not just women, of making a shift in industry as well as function from, financial, from being in a financial role to an operating role. Any insights, into making that shift? I know you had a crossroads early on at a business school. I think you were telling me that you had a choice. Do I go into finance? Do I go into marketing? But talk a little about that journey from switching, careers from finance to now an operating role.
Well, I'll ask another question of the audience. How many of you have switched your functional focus around through your career? So it's not that uncommon, right? And one of the women mentors from P&G and Schwister used to tell, career is not a straight line, it's a jungle gym, and I really do believe that is it, right? There are so many opportunities and sometimes unexpected opportunities that take us to different places. But I will also ask the question, how many of you had a goal 5 years ago to be in a position you are in? That's great, much fewer. I am one of the people who have not had ever a specific goal to be in a specific position or title. I don't know if it's good or bad. Everyone has a personal view on that, but I think it's individual actually for everyone. What I did have a goal is to challenge myself, and I love business. When people said, why you're in finance? I said, well, I'm not a finance person, I'm a business person. The reason I love finance, because I felt it gives me most objective view of the business and business levers, and I followed that passion, and opportunities came along. When I transitioned from CFO to COO role, it was quite unexpected. We were restarting our cruise operations after the pause of pandemic, and my CEO called and said, I need you to step into this role and lead the restart of operations. And I was scared. I was I never led all these functions. And he said, we would never ask you to lead it if we had any doubts that you can do it. And so sometimes you just get that confidence and say well, others believe in me, I'm gonna believe in myself. I loved it, and loved the more direct impact on what's happening, right, an executional aspect. And of course, when I got an opportunity to become a president, that was both exciting, huge honor, and again, in those crossroads in my life, what I found helpful is, one is knowing what my aspirations are. And my aspirations were not related to specific title, but they were very much related to chartering my own destiny, stepping outside of comfort zone and making sure that I feel I'm learning every day and making a difference. So that helped me decide, and if it met that criteria, I took it. And I did ask for advice. I really, really asked for advice of people I trusted. And so I personally found that incredibly helpful. And sometimes I was sharing with you the story when after grad school I was deciding between marketing job offer and finance. I truly didn't know. So I asked for advice of the person I trusted, and he said, listen, if you don't know, just do this. And I found it helpful occasionally, otherwise we can go through analysis paralysis.
Right. But that anecdote you just gave of not thinking you were ready for that next role, but being asked, we talked a little about that is a very different mentality probably from men to women, that women want to feel like they are 100% ready to take on the role before asking for the role. And you were really now posed with this real question of, do I take that leap and am I able to do it, versus even asking to be promoted into that role?
Yeah, I have a sense that probably majority of attendees here share that opinion, but if you are getting an opportunity for which you're 100% ready, then you're not aiming high enough and you're not developing yourself, right? That's my personal belief. So I don't think if we always wait for 100% ready, we wouldn't be learning new things. I do think, there is statistics, not that I think there is statistics that show that our male partners apply for a job when they meet slightly above 50% qualifications, and women don't even apply until they're 90% plus already. So I do think our male partners we can learn from, that they do have a little bit more of that confidence of I'm gonna learn and I'm gonna step up. I have 2 daughters, and I tell them all the time, do you want to do that? They say yes, but I'm not sure I can, and I'm afraid. I said, that's okay, do through being afraid. And by the 3rd time they do it, they're not afraid anymore. So I have to till now tell that to myself as well. I am afraid. Being afraid, there is a difference, right? Being courageous does not mean to be fearless. Being courageous means to be able to face your fears. And so I do think it's normal to feel uncomfortable, but stepping in and saying, I do want to do it, I will try. And what's the downside? The biggest downside is you will get no, and you'll stay with the status quo. But the upside is tremendous, because you might get next role, next opportunity, next promotion, and you will learn and make a difference. And we are really great at learning.
So I was going to ask you, but it may sound like in that answer, that one piece of advice that you wish you would have gotten earlier in your career, what was that one piece that you've learned later in your career, but if you would have had it a decade ago, you would have felt maybe different?
I don't know if it's I wish I had, but I did have a story that was an eye-opening for me early on in my career that I have shared several times with few people. I started at Procter & Gamble as a young analyst, and as I said, we were assigned mentors, and there were a lot of organized network and support programs. And about 6 months in, I was kicking ass. I had no doubts about that. I had no doubts about that. I did have a confidence to recognize the results that I was driving, but about 6 months in, we had this formal connect where this lady who was a director at the time, Erin O'Grady, was assigned to meet with me from a women network. She was obviously, a developed leader at the time, with my manager, and she was interviewing me. And one of the questions she asked me, she said, are you interested in director and above opportunities at some point of time? And I went on this long answer. I'm like, well, I'm gonna work hard and hopefully my results will be noticed, and on and on. She interrupted me and said, I need yes or no answer. And I again went on and on about like how my manager will give me feedback if I'm doing well. And she said, Natalia, we are not telling you we're going to promote you. You will have to earn that. I am just asking you a question. Are you interested in being a director in a buff role one day if you're ready? And your answer has to be yes or no. I don't let you speak more. So I sat there, I was so uncomfortable with that question, and I finally said yes, and she said, whew, okay, free to go. I left the room, and I was walking back with my manager, and he pulled me aside, and we had fantastic relationships with him. And he said, wow, you worked for me for 6 months. And I was super surprised with that answer. I said, what do you mean? He said, look, you never shared with me that you are interested in growing into leadership roles. And I said, well, I'm working hard and I'm hoping you're noticing the results. And he said, yes, but every one of your peers, all of them were men, by the way, at that specific organization at the time, have shared with me every aspiration for next 5 years. And so the longing for me was, and the advice that I give from there on to all women, no one is a mind reader. Do not leave your career in hands of someone else guessing. Share your dreams, aspirations, and what you want, and make it clear you may not get it today, but people in the world love to help someone else to achieve the dreams. And when your dreams are well articulated and well known, usually that saying, the universe sort of unites, and there will be way more opportunities opening up. So that would be my advice.
Great. I think that's a great place to end. Let's give a round of applause for Natalia Leahy from CBORN.
All right, everybody, please welcome to the stage, I believe, our first author of today, Josie Cox. Before we get into her book, I want everybody to pull out your phone. This is an interactive exercise. I feel like I've had a shtick every time I come up. Interactive exercise. Pull out your phones. I want you to go to your favorite book shopping site. I want you to type in women, money, and power. The Rise and Fall of Economic Equality. This is Josie's book. I am 3 chapters in, and it is absolutely foundational to our understanding of everything that we've heard already today. It actually underscores all of the programming that we've sat through already, and it's a very, very historical and anecdote-driven narrative of women's equity in the workplace. So Josie, welcome.
Thank you.
And I know we only have a short time together. We have to hold the mics close. So tell us why you felt so compelled to write the book, and if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of your background, because I think that's really important as to why you wrote the book.
Sure.
Okay.
Amy, thank you so much. And who knew that you also did publicity? There we go.
I'm a
That's something
hustler.
new every day. First of all, it's an absolute joy to be here this afternoon. I realize that we are literally standing between you and wine, so I appreciate the attention. And what a venue as well. I mean, look, it's still not over the view, so this is incredible. So as Amy said, I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist for about 15 years. I started my career at Reuters, covering financial markets. I then worked for several years as a correspondent at the Wall Street Journal. And, I wasn't writing about gender. I wasn't writing about the gender pay gap, about gender gaps generally. But in a way, I kind of was, because every time I was reporting a story about stocks going up, stocks going down, interest rates being cut, whatever it was, I felt compelled as a journalist and as a decent human to try and get gender balance into my stories. Because it just felt wrong that this topic of money, and big money as I tend to refer to it, is still so gendered in this day and age. That just didn't feel right. But it was a tough job because A, there were not a lot of women at the large companies that I was talking to who were cleared to speak to the press. And B, a lot of them had sort of been conditioned into thinking that they weren't good enough to speak to the press or that they didn't have anything to say. Anyway, so that was sort of my first encounter with this whole topic of gender inequality in the world of big money. Fast forward a few years, I became business editor at The Independent in the UK. That was also a time when a gender pay gap reporting mandate was coming into effect in the UK, which effectively meant that every company employing at least 250 people had to, from one day to the next, start publishing its gender pay gap for each quartile of the company. And so as a financial journalist, as someone who really gets excited about data, I suddenly had all this data at my fingertips, which was essentially spelling out what we already knew, but in sort of, presenting all this very compelling evidence around which we could start crafting these really important stories. And so at that point, I really realized that was going to be the focal point of my career. That was kind of the point when I realized that I was eventually going to write a book about this. But the book itself really came out of one particular moment. And it was in 2021. By this point, I'd gone freelance. I'd moved to New York. I actually moved here on the 13th of March, 2020, which I think I told you about. Everyone was like, oh, yeah.
Your doorman wasn't working.
He was not. No, maybe
But he
not
was
working.
working.
Yeah. But I was very fortunate in that I got the opportunity to go back to school, which was something I never thought I would do. I was offered a fellowship from Columbia Journalism School, which really gave me the opportunity to kind of step out of the grind of the freelance world for a few months, think about more ambitious projects, kind of bigger reporting projects that I wanted to tackle. And in the course of that fellowship, in February 2021, when we were sort of, really in the depths of pandemic living, by that point, we'd started labeling it as a she session. We'd started realizing that the impact of the pandemic was having, in many cases, a disproportionate effect on women and women in the labor market. A lot of women were being forced to take a step out of the paid labor market in order to pick up caring responsibilities as a result of school closures, etc. Many of us will remember that. So that was the backdrop. And I had the opportunity to interview a leader of a Fortune 500 company. Now, this person is a household name. You all know him. And
So we can't say the name.
it was off the record.
That's right.
So you will have to ply me with wine tonight in order to find out more details. But I had the opportunity to ask him a couple of questions, and being so interested in the gender gap in the economy, of course, I led with the question of why do you think the gender pay gap still exists? Why is it still so prevalent? And why hasn't it really moved over the last 20 years? And this person on Zoom, of course, turned to me and said, well, what I have to really understand is that sometimes when a woman leaves the paid labor market temporarily to take a maternity leave, to have a baby, start a family, when she comes back into the paid labor market, she is just not as professionally ambitious as she was.
How many parents are in the room? Bullshit. Thank you. Very well done. Yeah.
That evening, I went home and I started writing the book. Because, of course, my first instinct, as was demonstrated by many of you in the room just now, was outrage, right? Of course, I was furious. But I was also sad that at the highest echelons of business, there is still this total ignorance, feigned or real, I don't really care at this stage, that it is appropriate and accurate to effectively place the blame on women to fix a problem that is so pervasive, so systemic, and that also all of us feel the disadvantages of, right? The gender pay gap, I think we've all established by now, is not just a women's problem. It is not just a problem for women to fix, but it is also something that men will benefit from if we are able to close it, right? And so, this book is very much, it's scratching an itch that I've had for many years, but I also consider it a service to the industry in the sense that my goal, my mission was to educate about the complex nature of gender gaps that still shape the economy, both in the US and beyond, and to basically just kind of like lift the lid and say, look, this is the history since the Second World War of women's journeys into the paid labor market. This is what's happened. This is the progress that we should be celebrating, but also this is where we've gone wrong. So I hope that I've achieved that in some way, and I will let you judge that when you've had a chance to read the book.
And that's what I was finding so remarkable about literally the preface in chapter 1 of the book. I swear I'm not her agent. I'm just blown away by the writing. It's a historical deep dive into near history, right? It goes back to the 1800s, early 1900s. And it talks about how, we were mere possessions. Marriage is an act of subsumption. I am happily married. No shade on marriage. But all the rights we didn't have until the last 50 years. And the ratifications of laws that took 20 years after they were written into law. And it's really important because we all know that Yes We Can, the Rosie the Riveter poster, right? The women that ran the factories during World War II. But the uphill battles and the doors that were slammed in their faces when they thought, wait a minute, no, this financial autonomy, this empowerment I get, the double income at my household when my husband returned from the war, or sadly, if their spouse didn't return from the war, it was important for these women. But corporations were allowed to say, we're hiring for men only, or we'll pay you, but we're going to pay you even less than we did during the war, which was still a fraction of a man's salary. So now we're going to pay you 2x lower than what you were making during the war. And this is like, there's this adage, like, history repeats itself. This is a clear example of where history cannot repeat itself. This is like where we're all responsible for the advancement, the advocacy, the action we were talking about earlier, to create equity in the workplace. We had statistics from one of the women earlier. When women achieve pay equity in the workplace, what was the statistic? $465 billion hits the economy at large. That's good for everyone. So Josie, we identified 2 anecdotes you want to take us through.
Sure.
And then I've asked Josie to wrap us up as to what does she want us to take away from this quick session today. All right.
Wow, what a challenge. We could talk about this all day. Well, I could, you could. Yeah.
Clear.
Okay, so the book is a history. It chronicles essentially since the Second World War, but we certainly have some throwbacks to the 1800s, as you mentioned. But I'm not a historian. I'm not an economist. I'm a journalist, and I love writing profiles. So the book is very much structured around profiles, and I really wanted to take the opportunity in writing the book to shed light on some of these women through history who have not only been written out of history, but who are never written into history in the first place. Because I firmly believe that if we honor these people and if we celebrate their legacy, we are less likely to undermine the effort that they have gone to in order for us to be able to stand where we're standing today. So the first woman who I dedicate almost an entire chapter to is a lady named Catherine Dexter McCormick, who was probably no one's ever heard of. I would love to see a hand if someone knows who she is. But she was born in the 1870s in the Midwest. And long story short, she effectively provided all of the funding for the research and development into the first oral contraceptive pill that became available in this country in 1960. Now, she was from a wealthy family. She was a type of woman who just didn't care about the norms and mores of the moment. She understood her potential as a wealthy woman, as an educated woman. She was also one of the first women to graduate MIT. She was an innovator. She was an entrepreneur at a time when, entrepreneur is such a new term, right? I'm sure she'd never even dreamt of being called some French terminology.
Right.
But she, as one example of who she was, she posed as a medical supplies buyer at a time when contraception was not even a thought in mainstream culture in the US, when Comstock laws really prevented any kind of discussion around, separating sex from reproduction, quite frankly. She traveled to Europe. She bulk bought diaphragms from medical supplies companies in France and in Germany. She ripped open the linings of her coats and dresses. She sewed them inside and she smuggled them back into the US and then distributed them, right? So this is the kind of out-of-the-box thinking, excuse the cliche, that we can be inspired by if we know the name of the person upon whose shoulders we stand. So Catherine Dexter McCormick, and of course it should be said that we all appreciate today how inextricably linked access to healthcare, access to reproductive rights is with economic independence. And that is something that is so fundamentally important to every conversation that we have about economic rights, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The
The
second
research
person-
was literally dying on the vine when she came across the two medical scientists that were working on what's modern day the pill. And she met with them and she wrote the first check for $10,000 and eventually ended up giving over $40 million in research to the modern day pill science.
Yeah. I know we're so short on time, but if you want to know more about her, come talk to me afterwards.
Or me.
Or read the book. The second person I just want to take a moment to honor is a lady named Pauli Murray, who was a phenomenal legal scholar. She was the first black woman to be hired by a white short. This is ridiculous. She was the first black woman to be hired by a white shoe law firm in New York City. I never realized how difficult that is to say. A white shoe law firm in New York City. She had a summer analyst whose name was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She taught Ruth Bader Ginsburg an awful lot about the importance of intersectionality, about the rights of people of color, about women, about how the civil rights movement can learn from the women's rights movement. And in fact, not only can, but has to in order to succeed. She was also a lifelong friend of Eleanor Roosevelt, and when Eleanor Roosevelt was actually lying on her deathbed, she wrote a letter crediting Pauli Murray with so much of the moral compass that she had as this incredible champion of women and of civil rights. So Pauli Murray, even if you don't read the book, look her up. She's remarkable. She's been written out of history. Her name deserves to be screamed from the rooftops. So I'm just thrilled that I have the opportunity, even in a small way, to correct the historical narrative, I suppose, and to really shed a light on how much she did and how much we all benefit from that.
Well, let's talk about what Pauli did in 2008 that was pushed under the rug.
What's that?
Do I have the wrong anecdote?
Maybe, go on.
About the financial
She
crisis.
passed away in 70s, so.
Sorry, I'm a chapter ahead. So sorry. Okay, so one of the things that Josie said when we were on our prep call is, I said, what do you want we as the audience to take away from this? What is it we're going to learn, other than there's many more anecdotes in the book clearly? And you said we need to understand how systemic of a problem that this, how it interlopes through every facet of our collective human lives. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so, many of you will have read Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In 2013 when it came out. And I think that had a very important part in the chorus of conversation around women in the workplace. Nonetheless, I do think it did an unhelpful thing in the sense that it can be interpreted as placing the onus on women to fix themselves in order to fix the problem. Now, if people take away one thing from the book, it's that every single individual, every single institution, and every single government has a role to play. We need to, as governments, we need to provide policies like childcare. We need to treat childcare as a public utility in the way it is in some countries to great effect. But in this country, for example, childcare is squarely a burden of parents and individuals.
Right.
And if we change that, that would have a huge impact on labor force participation and on closing the gender pay gap. And just on enabling people to reach their full economic and professional potential in the workplace and beyond. Corporations can actually address the way that they function. The parameters of the workplace are still based on something that Henry Ford dreamed up 100 years ago, right? They are not fit for purpose. We saw that during the pandemic. If we provided flexible working, if we provided hybrid, if we actually considered the needs of employees and adapted our workplaces accordingly, that would also have an immeasurable effect on inequality in the workplace and on labor force participation. And then the individual, my goodness, where to begin, right?
Right.
Every single person, regardless of your gender, has a role to play. I still characterize, where we are today as sort of the legal part of what we've done. We've achieved an awful lot in terms of the legal part and the law. But that's a huge fishing net with these huge holes, right? The most egregious legal offenses get caught in that. You can't fire a woman for getting pregnant, for example. But everything else kind of weasels its way through. And that's culture, that's microaggressions, that's hiring decisions, that's biases, that's heuristics. And it's our responsibility, as humans, all of us are biased. That's not a bad thing, that's just the way it is. But it is our responsibility to understand how the biases that inform our own decision making impact the world around us, and impact the teams we manage, and impact the people we speak to. So if there's one takeaway from the book, learn more about your own biases, learn about the science behind decision making in workplaces, and just take a long, hard look at how you're impacting the world around you and the teams in which you work and the people with whom you have relationships.
Thank you. Everybody, the book Women, Money, and Power. This is Josie Cox. Find her at Happy Hour. I'm trying to convince her to stay for all your questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
So much for having me. Thank you.
everybody. Thank you very much. Great pleasure to be here. And, you probably, I know you're all big classical music fans, right? Okay, you don't have to lie to me. But you're probably wondering, what am I doing listening to a conductor talk, and how does that relate to my life? But as you can probably see from this slide, the challenges that I've faced are probably similar challenges, if not bigger challenges than all of you have faced. To me, I'm very proud to be the first woman to achieve all these milestones, but I'm also pretty shocked, and I feel it's pretty pathetic that we can be in the 21st century and still have firsts for women. So, and you can imagine when I started out in this field 40 years ago, it was even more onerous at that moment. So today, though, I don't know if this is good news. It's still more likely today that a woman will head a G7 nation than will lead one of the top 10 orchestras in the world. So that's where we are, which is something that I think we really need to address in a bigger way. And why is that? Classical music, of course, is very conservative industry. They're still wearing the same clothes they wore 200 years ago and playing the same music. And, everyone has this archetypal image of, even I do, of the maestro. He is European, or he has an accent at least, and maybe an ascot, or maybe that's the old days. But, it's very hard to break these mythological concepts. And also, becoming a conductor is really the ultimate power position. And I think that's what it's more about, that women are not embraced in the ultimate power positions. I think what I do is probably similar to what everyone in this room has experienced doing. I have to work with hundreds of extremely talented individuals with very large egos. And I have to get them on side to share my vision for the piece of music or whatever your business is. And then we have to convey that to our constituents, the audience. So conducting is really the manifestation of that action of a woman in charge. To become a conductor is a tricky thing because you don't have an instrument. It's not like playing the violin. I played the violin. I was born in New York City, and my parents were both professional musicians, and I'm pretty sure they didn't want children, they just needed a pianist. And so this is why I was born. And so as soon as I was tall enough, I started playing the piano, and I hated the piano. I'm going to share with you, I hated it. And my mother and I really, it was a bloodbath every day over the piano. But, this was a great lesson for me, even at that age, because I started to understand that for every person, there is an instrument, and you have to let them explore that. So I retired from the piano when I was 6, and I had a year off, and then my parents tricked me into playing the violin. They sent me to a camp. We lived on, 107th in Amsterdam, and they said, you want to go to summer camp? And anyway, it was violin summer camp. They didn't mention that until right before I left. But it was interesting because I hadn't played the violin before, but I loved the violin. There was a physicality about it that suited me, and I loved working and playing with other kids. And when I came back, I guess I got pretty good in those 8 weeks away at Sleepaway summer violin camp, and they enrolled me in the Juilliard Pre-College here in New York, and I got to play in the orchestra, which I absolutely loved. And I was way in the back, and the timpanist was playing, and he was so cute. I just loved it, the whole thing was great. And then they called me in and said, they called my parents in, and they said, we're getting a lot of complaints that someone in the back is trying to lead the whole orchestra. So, it's like, this classical music thing was so buttoned down. It was such a drag. And luckily my dad took me, I was about 9 years old by this time, my dad took me to a concert, and I saw the conductor come out, and he was like joyous. He was having a great time, and no one was yelling at him. right? You know, he was jumping around, he was talking to the audience. It ended up that he was Leonard Bernstein, who was conducting, who later became my teacher. But at that moment, I was 9 years old, and I said to my dad, okay, I want to be him. I'm going to be the conductor. So that was when I decided, and you know, it wasn't an easy pathway from that decision, because when I told my violin teacher, this was the first time I encountered this. She said, you know, you're too young. I said, okay, well, that'll change. And she said, and girls can't do that. Yeah. And this was what I was met with every step of the way. Girls can't do that. And luckily my parents, my mother was so mad. Oh, she wanted to sue Juilliard. Oh, that's ridiculous. And my dad, who couldn't really get a word in edgewise when my mother was around, but when I got up the next morning after this encounter, there was a long wooden box on the table, and I opened it up, and there were batons in it, conducting batons. And that's how my parents supported me through this. But, you know, it's tricky. Again, as I said, I couldn't try conducting because you need at least 20 people to come over to your house to practice, or, you know, and ideally 40 every day for a couple hours. So I decided I would apply. I went to Juilliard. I got my bachelor and my master's degree at Juilliard School in violin performance. And I applied for the conducting program 3 times, and I was rejected every time. Sometimes I conducted a little, I got pretty far. When they recently gave me an honorary degree, I enjoyed reading them my rejection letters. Everyone liked that very much. But anyway, I decided instead I would start my own orchestra, because then I could figure out how to conduct. And I'd use all my friends. Listen, in the meanwhile, I had also started a swing band. This is quite entertaining. called String Fever. All women, you'll notice. Because after I called about 4 of my friends, I realized I had called all my girlfriends, and I said, why not? Let's do this. So this was a wild group that we had. We played swing music and some rock music, and we played for a wedding. This is why I'm telling you about this, for a Japanese businessman named Tomio Taki. And he paid in cash. So I thought, he's going to be a good candidate to help me start an orchestra, I think. So I called him up, and he said the thing that probably none of you would say to me, you know, I really don't like classical music. And he said, but I'll help you. This is the guy, I just played at his wedding. That's the only thing. He didn't know me at all. And he supported me and my orchestra for the next 18 years. Yeah, amazing, pretty amazing. And when we came to the end of the orchestra, you know, my career was starting to take off. I mean, of course, there are a lot of turns around, and there's a recent documentary, if you feel like renting it on Amazon Prime, called The Conductor, so you can get the whole backstory if you want it. But Mr. Taki said, you know, we managed to do what we set out to do. There's now a woman in this field. He said, but you know, what are you going to do about all the women that follow you? He had that way, you know, and then he walked away, and I thought, oh my God, well now what am I going to do? So I decided this was in 2002, I decided to start a fellowship. It's called the Taki Alsop Conducting Fellowship. Because if I am not going to try to be part of changing the landscape for the future, who's going to do it? I mean, there's nobody that's going to do it out there whatsoever. So just before I tell you about the fellowship, which is really what I'm devoting a lot of my time to these days, I just want to tell you the story about being appointed. In 2007, I received this wonderful phone call from out of the blue from the head of the board of the Baltimore Symphony, which is one of the major orchestras in the United States. There are only 15 major orchestras in the United States. And they said, the board would like to offer you the position of music director. And I said, fantastic. And you know, this is great. Great news. I'm from New York. I want to go back to the East Coast. And so, but the next day I got up to a few phone calls from my press people saying, there seems to be some problem. There's a little bit of pushback. A little bit of pushback turned into a lot of pushback. And I was pretty horrified to open the Washington Post and see my picture not in the art section, but on the front page of the Washington Post, and the caption underneath, "Musicians balk at appointment of new music director," BALK. So here I was now. Their reasoning was that this was going to set the orchestra back several generations. I mean, nobody said we don't want a woman in charge. There were all kinds of, rationale behind this, but, that's fundamentally what it was. So here I was in this position of being offered the first woman to head a major American orchestra. Now, what am I going to do? Everybody I talked to in the industry said, "You get away from those people. They're crazy. You don't want." And I thought, what message is that going to send? The first woman invited to serve as the head of an orchestra and chickened out and didn't take the job. So I went to Baltimore and I decided to sort of surprise the musicians. And I went to the beginning of one of their rehearsals, and believe me, they were definitely surprised. And I talked to them though, really about, I said, I don't know if I can get over what you've done to me, but you don't know who I am, and you don't know what I can do for you. And I laid out a plan in about 6-7 minutes, and I said, but I'm not going to sign this contract unless I have your support. And before I left the stage, they said, "You have our support." I didn't believe them, but it was okay anyway. But I think this unbelievable trauma, because I saw everything I had worked for so long just almost destroyed overnight. And I decided I'm just going to go step by step. And I don't have to, in a way it was liberating, because I didn't have to try to spend time, being liked, because that was hopeless. I decided that the best way to achieve what my goals would be to create an atmosphere of joy and success. And that's what I set out to do. And gradually, I was able to increase their audiences back to sold out concerts. I brought them a recording project. I brought them touring. And most importantly, I started a program because I looked at the members of the orchestra, and they were basically, I think we have one musician of color. And in Baltimore, that was ridiculous to me. So I decided to try my theory that all children are born geniuses. And if given the same opportunity, every single child can achieve success. So after a long process of discussion and arguing and this and that, I took some money that I got from the MacArthur Foundation, and I started a program in West Baltimore with 30 first grade kids. It's called OrKids, Orchestra Kids. And I have to say that today that's probably the greatest initiative that the Baltimore Symphony has, and there are over 2,000 kids now playing musical instruments and graduating from college in music education, music management, and I have to say that I ended up being the longest serving music director of the Baltimore Symphony. I was there for 14 years. Thank you. And I go back, I have a contract now to return and conduct every season for 2 weeks, and I have to say those are their only sold out concerts, but I'm not gonna rub their nose in it. But this is really my passion these days, is the fellowship that I started in Mr. Taki's name. And what I've found is that all of these women, like me, are out there and they don't have a community of people. They don't have a support system. So especially during COVID, when all of our work as conductors was canceled, we met every week and we formed this incredible bond. And for me, the most important thing about the fellowship is that it is tailored to each conductor. It's tailored to what the woman needs in her career, in her development, and it's all about mentorship. And so not only do we have our let's see, oh, that's me, sorry. Not only do we have our 36 awardees, we also have 30 additional mentees. So I've tasked our 36 Taki awardees with mentoring another 30 women. So they are all continuing this cycle of mentorship, which I believe is really the key to success in life. And I tell people that, you know, you can just say one sentence and it can change someone's life. You know, I believe in you, I know you can do it, whatever it is. I think that that's absolutely critical. And, you know, from studying with Leonard Bernstein, eventually became my teacher, and that was the message he gave me. I believe in you, I know you can do it. And these days, you know, people are often asking me, well, do we really need something? Do we need a fellowship for women? And, you know, part of me says, are you seriously asking me that question? But, you know, if it hadn't been for the Me Too movement, I just want to say this in this room, nothing would have changed. Because all of these institutions had the choice 30 years ago to hire women, and they chose not to. And it was only when their feet were put to the fire that they started hiring women. And this to me is, look, I'll take it, you know, the door's open, let's continue. But it's also a trend, and it's ticking a box. And I think now is the moment that we really need to sort of join arms and say, okay, let's push forward. I think now's the moment to be even more vigilant, because as we see, certainly we see in the United States, that all of our rights, which are so slow in coming, they can be pulled out from under us overnight. And this is something that we really have to be cognizant of, that now is the moment to push forward, not to say, okay, you have enough. That's sort of what women are always told, look, you made enough progress, but we haven't. We need to stay strong and keep going, and that's my last slide, and that's you to know well. Thank you all very much.